Hello everybody, welcome. I am Greg from Atypical Engineer, and this video is an introduction to ReactJS. In fact, it's just a tutorial about getting set up with Hello World. So if you are anywhere past that stage, then you might want to move on to a different video because this video is going to be absolute basics. Now that being said, this video will be exclusively using OSX. The entire tutorial screen, step by step, will be using a fresh MacBook right out of the box. And what we'll be doing is using the command line to install Mac CLI XCode tools. We will be installing Node.js. We will be creating create React app, which is starter code for ReactJS. We'll be making a GitHub account and pushing our changes up to GitHub. And then we'll make some very basic changes in the React project, and we will see them reflected in the browser before we make a commit and push it up to Git. So if this sounds too easy for you, then you can move on to a different video. But if you're ready to get started with a Hello World in React on Mac OS X, then let's go.
Okay, welcome everybody. Here we are in the captain's chair, and we are going to get started right out of the gate. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is to use terminal, or at least be familiar with the command line. And the command line is a super critical piece of every programmer's skill set. So for Mac, you can hit the command and space bar buttons, and that brings up this thing called Spotlight, and then you can type terminal, and you can double click on the terminal application. This comes pre-installed on your Mac. And once you click on this, you should have this little box open. And so I'll just resize and drag around, and this is basically your interface to the computer. We use the command line because oftentimes it's much more powerful than using a user interface. Whoever codes the user interface has to surface specific features, and they don't always surface all the features that are available through the command line. And the other thing is that many pieces of software can only be installed through the command line, or it's much easier to install them through the command line. So these are a couple reasons why we actually use command line as programmers. Once we have the command line up and running, we're going to go ahead and install the XCode CLI tools, command line interface tools. And to do that, we're going to hit up our trusty Google, and we're going to Google how to install XCode CLI tools. We're going to hit this, and this obviously is going to bring up the exact instructions. We're going to go back up and say on Mac. And this first link, this link that I've already clicked, is the one we're going to go to. It's OSX Daily, which is a great OSX resource. And eventually we're going to scroll down, and we're just going to see this little command, xcode select -- install, and we'll copy it, right? As you can see, this was made for the command line, so it's a good thing we picked that. And we'll highlight the command, and then we'll go back over to our terminal, and we're just going to paste it into the command line and go ahead and hit enter, and then go through the installation steps, and we're going to let this run. Now, while this is going, I am going to go back over to the page on Google because I'm just interested to find some acceptance criteria. So what does it mean to have the installation succeed? And here you can see that if I can run GCC or Git or SVN or any of these commands, then that means that the installation has succeeded. And that's pretty important to know what the acceptance criteria of what you're doing are. And now when I go back to the terminal, this thing has completed, and when I run Git, everything seems to be okay. And so we can move on to steps 2, XCode CLI tools are installed. Okay, the next step is to install something called Node.js, which will run a local server on our own computer. And to do this, we're going to install something called NVM, Node Version Manager. You can see that I have the GitHub profile of NVM pulled up here. This will help you to manage all the different versions of Node that you have on your machine. And this may seem like overkill at first, but what's probably going to happen eventually is that when you work on a different project, that project might have a different version of Node because Node evolves very quickly, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to bring a project that's on a previous version of Node up to the newest version, because if it's already working on the old version, then it doesn't matter. So here, if you have NVM, you'll be able to switch between versions of Node on your own machine extremely, extremely easily. One command on the command line. Okay, so down here I have a curl command that will help me to update or to download and install, but I do want to just take note of the version 0.35.3. That's the current version as of the making of this video. And I want to use this to make one point, and I'll go to Google, and I just want to point out the dangers of following random instructions on the internet. Because if I just Google how to install NVM here, and then you can see that I've kind of clicked a couple links, so they're not all that bad. But if I go down here and say Beginner's Guide to Node.js, which seems like it would be pretty accurate, I start to scroll down, and this tutorial actually has a version 0.32.1. Okay, so before we were 35.3 on the official documentation, and this is 32.1. And the problem here is that anybody who's posting to use a very specific version of Node or any other tool, especially when you're getting started, this is going to get outdated super quickly. So that's why going to the documentation pages, the GitHub pages that we were at initially, is super, super important. Now, you might see some tutorials for very specific versions of specific software, and if it's integrating with specific other versions, then of course you might have to do that. But if you're just starting out, then going for the latest stable version is usually the best option. So just be careful about where you find your instructions. Okay, so I'm not going to recommend a certain version of NVM. I'm really just going to say go to the documentation and find whatever today's most recent version is and just install that. So that means we're going to go ahead and go back to the GitHub page instead of using this beginner's tutorial. And when we do that, we will copy the command, of course, and then we will go over to the terminal and we will paste the command into our terminal and hit enter, and let's see what happens. And boom, we failed. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at why it failed. So up here we see that it says profile not found, tried a bunch of different files, and what this is saying is that it actually needs to write to a shell configuration file, and that file does not exist. And my particular shell is ZSH because that's what comes pre-installed on OSX when you open terminal. So this isn't really that bad. It's a relatively easy error to fix. All right, we're just going to run something called touch, which if a file doesn't exist, we'll create it, although it won't write anything into the file. What touch really does is just update it, change the updated time on the file. So I'll touch the ZSHRC file, and now I'll use a command called cat, which basically just prints out the contents of a file. So I'll run cat on this file, and it should be empty, but it shouldn't error because the file actually exists. And then I will do the command again. So let's paste the command again. And this time I did not get the same error. Okay, that's really cool. I will cat out my ZSHRC file again. And this time I actually see some output. So they're setting up some kind of environment stuff. And this is good. This is what we want to see. So let's go ahead and run NVM to see if it works. And boom, command not found. But if you go up and read the results when we installed it, we can see that there's a line that says close and reopen your terminal to start using NVM. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to close the terminal. And then we're going to hit Command space. And we're going to open the terminal again. And we are going to run NVM one more time. And now we see some nice output. Okay, here's all basically the documentation, the man page of what NVM can do. You can check out all of these commands, but most of them aren't relevant to you right now. What we really want to do, we're going to clear, and then we're going to just hit NVM -- version. So let's just check to see what version we have. And if you remember, it was 35.3 when we took that command from the NVM GitHub. So that's super solid. And then there's a command called NVM list, and that will list all the versions of Node that you have installed. So let's go ahead and issue the NVM list command. Ooh, here we can see that there are no versions of Node installed. Now we have to install Node. So we'll clear, and then we run NVM again. And then now I'm going to run NVM install Node. And so what this will actually do is it will install the latest version of Node that exists. Okay, we say it's downloading, installing version 14.2. So let's nvm list again, and now we see there's a difference. Now it says that our default node is for 14.2. So that's awesome. And just as one more check, let's go node-v, and it says v 14.2. So this is awesome. We now have Node installed, and it's version 14.2 on our machine, and we are ready to go on to step 3. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is start to create our project. So we're here in the base directory, and we're going to make a project directory. Again, this is a brand new machine, and then I'll list all the directories there, ls, and then I'll go cd projects, change directory into the projects directory, and then I'll ls again. And if I hit pwd, I see that I'm in users gpits projects, which is perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the create React app documentation. Okay, this is on reactjs.org, and this is a really great page. Create React app is just a starter project for anybody who's learning React, and it's really a starting place for prototyping any kind of React project. And it allows you to have a React project up and running in a matter of seconds. So that's what we're going to use in this tutorial. This npx command will work because we've previously installed npm, and we also have Node, right? So all that stuff was installed by the nvm thing that we did in the previous step. So we'll go over to the terminal, and we will type the command. I don't know why I didn't paste it, but we're gonna type the command, and I'm gonna type the name of the project as the last word in this command. So I'm gonna create a React app in the Pokedex directory. It's gonna be called Pokedex, and then I'll hit enter, and we'll wait. This will just take a second. Okay, and then we see it is finished and wished us happy hacking, which is so nice of them. So what we want to do now, I mean, the project is basically created, and now we can go and start and run the project. The steps to do that are, first, we're going to change directories into the Pokedex directory, which is created when we did the create React app command. And now I just want to run npm start. So this will start Node.js on our machine, and because I'm running it in the Pokedex directory, it will launch that application, and here we go. Okay, so this is the starter template for create React app, and it has some instructions there plus a link of how to learn React, so all of this is good. And so we'll be extending this for the rest of this video, and the extensions will be small, but you'll still be making changes. Okay, so just to make the point, we'll go over to the terminal and we'll press Control-C, and this exits Node. All right, so now I can see I have access back to the command line now. And if I go over to the browser after exiting Node and then I try to refresh, you're going to see that it doesn't work anymore. Okay, so you have to have Node running in order to be seeing what your project is doing. And then if I go back and I run npm start again, then it will automatically reopen the create React app instance. Okay, so I run it, and then I see that this is going to load right back up. And now when I refresh, okay, it's going to refresh whatever. So you have to have Node running when you're doing this project. Okay, now we're going to move on to getting our project set up in Git. The next step is to put our project into a Git repository. I usually recommend the command line for people to use with Git, but for the purpose of this project, we're going to use the Git Desktop user interface. And the reason is really basic. When you're learning something, your goal should be to reduce complexity of all the things surrounding the thing you're trying to learn, and to focus on that one thing. And so if you're comfortable with Git command line already, then you can skip this step and you don't really have to use it. If you've never used Git before, then this is not really the time to learn. You'll become familiar with it throughout the use of the user interface, but learning Git on the command line is a task in itself, and so I wouldn't recommend learning command line Git if you are doing this tutorial. Okay, so what we're going to do instead is we're going to go to desktop.github.com, and we're going to download this basically a user interface wrapper for the command line. Okay, and this will just make it easier for us to understand and to know what's going on with Git. So we'll go here and we will click the download button, and the application is going to download. Again, this is a completely clean machine, so everything is brand new. And then I'm going to go ahead and just create an account just for the purpose of being thorough. And we'll go through all the things here, and we'll create the account. And then basically it'll ask me to complete the setup, which I will do. I will verify the email address. And then I'll come and I will sign into the actual GitHub website. Okay, so now I'm on my brand new GitHub account. I have this, there's no repositories, there's no nothing. So the rest of this segment, we're just going to add our local project to this account. And that means that we're going to go back to our GitHub desktop. And then if you have to remember the username and the email that you just typed in, and you log into the same account. And now we didn't do any configuration on the website, so now it's going to ask you what you want your name to be and what you want the email address to be associated with any commits that you make. And you can see there's an example commit down near the bottom. Okay, and this is important because anybody who is looking at the history of the repository will have to look at this to see the commits that you've made. Okay, so you want this to be something where people can contact you or not. And then as you continue to go through this, you'll eventually end up at this, basically just the Get Started page. And you have 4 options here, and you can create the tutorial repository, but we already have a repository because we created the Pokedex app. So we will just go ahead and add an existing repository from our hard drive. So go ahead and click that. And then it's going to open this up, and we are going to navigate to the place where our Pokedex project is, and just select the Pokedex top level project. And now it's giving us this command, which is saying the local path and giving us the option to add the repository, which is awesome. Cool. So now you can see that we have our current repository is up here in Pokedex, and our current branch is master. You don't have to worry about that right now. The thing I want to worry about now is that we can publish the repository to GitHub. That is what we're trying to get accomplished here. So we'll go ahead and we will click publish repository. And then we want to give a little description of the repository. So this is like a description of the entire project, not of any one single commit. So we'll just call this a Pokedex written in ReactJS. And we'll name it Pokedex, and I will make this not private so other people can see it. And then I'll go ahead and click Publish. And now, when I go back to the website and I refresh, you're going to see that I now have a repository. And if I go into that repository, then I can see all the files. So this is pretty cool. Now my repository is not only is it backed up on the GitHub website and servers, but now I can share my code with anybody else who wants to do it. So I can share my Pokedex code with you. This is really powerful. So the next thing that we'll do is we will actually go and make code modifications and see them. And then we'll push those changes up to our repository. But to make those code changes, we first have to install some code editing software. So let's do that next. And what I typically recommend to absolute beginners is VSCode. And for this, I'm not making an opinionated value judgment against other code editors. All I'm saying is that VSCode is very easy to use, and similar to what I said with the GitHub desktop, if your goal is to learn React, then you should minimize the distractions around you, and you should use the simplest tools possible so you can focus your efforts on learning what you want to learn. Okay, so if you already have your code editor of choice, then go ahead and use that. You can skip this section, but for beginners, I recommend VS Code because it's basic, it's simple, and because Microsoft built it. And Microsoft's user interface and their flow is very similar across products. That's why they're a good brand. And so this will just give beginners a little bit easier time getting used to it. Everybody is used to Microsoft's user flow. Okay, so we are going to go to the Google search bar and search for VS Code, and then we will click on the first link, and we will download VS Code for Mac. And we can save the file on our Mac machine, and then once it downloads, we will go up and we will unzip the VS Code application. And once that's done, you can just double-click VS Code or move it into the applications folder and double-click it, whatever. But you'll see that we will have VS Code opened up, so it's very quick to set up. And the first thing that I'm going to do is go to Code Preferences Settings. And then I'm going to type in telemetry, and I'm going to disable the telemetry feature. This stops VS Code from sending information back to Microsoft about my usage of the software. Otherwise, we are good to go. So we can go ahead and open the project. You can go to File and then Open. And we will just navigate to our projects directory. I'll add it to my sidebar here. This is a new computer. And then go to the Pokedex project, and we'll open the top level directory of Pokedex. Okay, so now we have VS Code is open, and we are browsing our code. So here on the left, you can see the directory tree of the source code, and just kind of like clicking through these things, you should see some familiar stuff like this logo. Okay, so now we have the source code set up in a code editor, and the next step is to actually make some changes. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, in order to make our changes, we want to be able to see our changes reflected in the browser when we make them. So in order to do that, we're going to go back to our terminal, and we're going to start npm. Okay, so we go back to the terminal. Remember, we're in the Pokedex directory, and then we're going to say npm start. And here we go. We are booting up, and we have Node running, and we can see that this says edit source/app.js and save to reload. So let's go do that. We'll go over to our VS Code next, and then we will find source and app.js, and we will click on it. And here you can see the source code for app.js. And it's basically just one function, and it just returns a bunch of markup. Okay, and this markup it's HTML. So this is basically all that this function is doing right now, and you don't have to worry about what's going on. We'll cover that in other videos. So for the time being, you just need to know that you want to change the code that says edit source/app.js and save to reload. So you don't really need to know much about the code. You just need to know where to find that particular sequence of words, which is right here on line 11. Before we actually edit anything, we're going to just make sure that we can see both screens at the same time. So we'll pull the VS Code over to one side, and we will pull the browser over to the other. And then now, finally, we're going to go to line 11, and we're going to highlight the code, and we're going to delete, and then we're going to type, hello world, my name is Gregory, or whatever your name is, and then you're going to save it. And what you'll see is that the changes get reflected over on the left side of the screen as soon as you save it. Pretty cool, right? This is the case with all the changes you make in your React app. So let's just go ahead and add another little wink face. We'll go down and we'll add another paragraph tag, and then we'll add the little wink smiley. And when we save it again, now we will have a little wink face on the React application. So this is pretty cool. We can see how the development flow kind of works. You're going to make code changes in your editor. You're going to see them reflected on your browser. Okay, this is awesome. We've made changes. The next and final step of this video is to push those changes to your remote repository, and then we'll be finished for this video. All right, so we are on the final section, and in this section, we are just going to take those changes that we made before, and we're going to push them onto the remote repository that we also made before. So this is just kind of wrapping everything up and saving your changes in a remote repository. Now, if you go over to the GitHub Desktop program, you can see that it's already showing that you've made changes to your source code. And here it says, you can see that the changes in red are lines that have been removed. and changes in green are the lines that have been added. Okay, so you can pretty clearly see the diff. It's small, and this is the code change that we want to commit. So over here on the left side, we're just going to make sure that source/app.js is checked, because that means that we're going to include that file in the list of files that we're adding into this commit. And then we're going to go down to the lower left corner here, and we see that we can add a commit title. So this is just kind of like, this is a title for the code change that you're making, and we're just going to say that we are saying hello world. And then we're going to type in just a little bit of a description. So best practice is to kind of describe what you've been doing, and every team has different standards, but you should kind of leave a description so that somebody who doesn't know you or who doesn't know your code can look at it and kind of gather what you've done with this change. And once you've done that, you're going to go down to very bottom left corner, and you're just going to click commit to master. So what this is doing is it's saving this commit on your master branch in your local repository. Okay, so after we commit, let's just take a little bit of look around at the desktop GitHub, and we can see that if we go to view and then show history, okay, we can see all the commits for this repository on the left-hand side. And the initial one was to initialize the project. But we can also see that you have the saying hello world commit. And if you click on it, you can see the code change that we just made. And there's all this other information. So you can see the file you changed, you can see your name, you can see the ID of this commit, how many files you changed, and you can see the commit message that you typed in when you made this commit. So this is all very cool. It's pretty much a wrapper on top of the Git command line. If we go back to the Changes tab here, we see that we have one commit that we can push to our remote. Okay, so this means that we've made this commit locally, but now we want to push it up to our remote GitHub account. And so we can just go over and click this Push Origin button, and now there's a little bit of a progress bar up there. And because we're pushing up to the remote repository. But once we've done that, this prompt disappears, and now we don't have any more changes to push. But if we go and check the GitHub on the GitHub servers, we would expect for our change to be there. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go back to the browser, and then we'll open github.com, and we will go into our Pokedex repository. And when we click on this, it will load up the information for the repository. And now you can see that there's two commits. And if you go and you click on that, then you can see that there's your initial commit and there's your hello world commit. And clicking on the hello world commit will show your code changes. So this is the general process for how we are going to make changes to the Pokedex repository and how you can make changes to your React project. This concludes basically the hello world version of Create React App and ReactJS. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Please like if you thought this video was useful, or hit the subscribe button, because I will be bringing many more videos just like this later on. So until then, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.